So,
okay. Why did you choose medicine?
Why did I choose medicine? Because it offered so many possibilities. It's difficult to make and almost impossible to make a definite choice at the age of 18, when in Sweden you have to decide what kind of university training you want. But medicine offered everything. I was interested in biological science. I was interested in working with people, so I thought, I'm sure that I'll find some speciality or something that will fit me very well.
And why did you end up in nephrology?
That was relatively early. This was an exciting time for nephrology. I've been interested in, I've spent actually during my time as a medical student, I spent 2 years at Yale University, took off flexible, we have a very flexible system in Sweden, we still have. So I took off from medical school 2 years to go to Yale University and do research. And I was fortunate to be in a place where they did both morphology and physiology, and I found the kidney the most exciting organ to work with at that time. It still is. This was a place that actually specialized in lung pathology. That was relatively early. This was an exciting time for nephrology. I've been interested in, I've spent actually during my time as a medical student, I spent 2 years at Yale University, took off flexible, we have a very flexible system in Sweden, we still have. So I took off from medical school 2 years to go to Yale University and do research. And I was fortunate to be in a place where they did both morphology and physiology. And I found the kidney the most exciting organ to work with at that time. It still is. This was a place that actually specialized in lung pathology, but I found the kidney more interesting. And it was a time when people were doing micropuncture studies. You could actually work on a almost a cellular level. Very few other organs offered that possibility. So then I went back, graduated from medical school, and at that time it was a mature decision to go into pediatrics, which I think was it's a wonderful specialty. It's a specialty full of hope, and you feel you can really do something here. And then with my background then in knowing about or being so fascinated by the way that the kidney works, at that time, newborn infants, well, at that time there was a big change in pediatrics in that we could all of a sudden save then infants that were born 10 weeks before term. But the problem was the electrolyte disturbances, indicating that okay, some organs were matured or went through maturation at birth. The kidney took a long time, and was not mature enough to have any responsibility itself at the time of birth. So that's when I started to study the regulation of salt, of sodium metabolism in newborn infants, and found that could confirm that they did not have the capacity to regulate sodium homeostasis or water homeostasis. But fortunately, healthy infants just get a certain amount of fluid every day with a given amount of salt, so it's not that much of a challenge. But for the very early born babies, for the preterm babies, there were great fluctuations, and many of them got very low sodium, had very low sodium or very high sodium, and that contributed to brain damage. So I felt that this was something that was important to study and to be able to formulate better than how we should treat them in the intensive care, and so I think that has helped to eliminate one problem in the intensive care for newborn infants. And then, of course, I became interested, why is this so, and what is the mechanism? And that then led me back to basic science and doing kidney, working on the kidney from the basic science point of view. Still being a training as a pediatric nephrology, and I remained so for many, many years. Then I've been working mainly with kidneys, with children with kidney diseases. No regret whatsoever. I love what I do, I still do. I still look forward every morning to go to work. So no regret. Okay, well, my first mentor was Professor Eivor Libo, Professor of Pathology at Yale University, from whom I learned the basics about science and the importance to combine to understand both function and structure. And also to look at the function of the whole organ and also at a more cellular level. Then I came back to Sweden and I got my training in pediatrics, and I was fortunate to work with Rolf Zetterström, who is a leading pediatrician in Europe. And from him I learned how to approach children, how to understand them, and to ask the relevant questions. And I think this has been very important for me throughout my career, that to base your research on medically relevant questions. The third important mentor is Paul Greengard. He is a professor of neuroscience at Rockefeller, a Nobel laureate about 10 years ago. And this was a time when our group had been identifying dopamine as an intrarenal hormone, and we found the target for it. It was the salt pump, the sodium potassium ATPase. And Paul Greengard, being the world then authority on dopamine in the brain, he actually recruited me to neuroscience. So since then, since my first meeting with Paul, I think I've divided my attention scientifically between the brain and the kidney, and finding great similarities. I mean, these are the two organs that are responsible also for all kind of homeostasis, from your behavior to the way that you control your water homeostasis. The cells are the most are totally dependent on an appropriate ion transport. So we worked together in parallel on studies on the neuron and on the nephron, and learned a lot from that. Besides, I learned from Paul how to also approach and to how to I would say evaluate and interpret the results, and never hesitate to accept unexpected results. They would have faith in you, they have to be encouraging, you have to look up to them because of their knowledge and their integrity. And they should also be a bit demanding, because you should always meet with challenges. If you don't, I think that you sort of lose a little bit of your initiative.
How are you as a master?
Oh, you have to ask my students. But I've had quite a lot of both PhD students and postdocs. More than 40 PhD students, so I guess I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, I'm trying to live up to my ideals, not all the time, it doesn't work all the time, but it's to have confidence in the students and to make them also understand the beauty of science, but also that you have to strive for perfection. I think it's the most extraordinary thing to understand or see something that has not been there seen before, and every time to discover how clever nature has been. Always be sort of, you have a hypothesis or you write a grant, and sometimes it turns out almost as you wrote, but nature is always a little bit smarter than you, and then when you can realize that and see that, that's great. Those are the great moments. And then if that in addition has an impact, a medical impact, it's wonderful. I think I enjoy having PhD students and postdocs, to meet with them. I think one-to-one, that's what I enjoy the most, or to meet with a small group of students, and they should also be brave to dare to argue against me. That's what I enjoy the most. Yeah, I think the descriptive studies on how infants regulate salt balance were important clinically, but that led me to study go to basic science and study the main regulator of sodium balance, the salt pump, sodium potassium ATPase. And I think one of the real breakthrough for our group was when we discovered that it was regulated by dopamine, and that dopamine was an intrarenal natriuretic hormone. So this was, and again, nobody felt that the pump is such a, it's a very important molecule, but it's very dull. It's not regulated. It's just there to pump. And then we said, no, that's not true. It's much more dynamic. And it was a lot of resistance first to it. It took us, I think, 2 years almost to get that paper published in American Journal of Physiology. And it's now one of my most quoted papers, and now nobody would then doubt that the pump is an extremely dynamic molecule. And the next very important finding was a serendipitous finding that this pump is not only a pump, it's a fascinating molecule because it's also a signal transducer. It has a ligand, or it has several ligands. They all belong to the family of cardiotronic steroids, to which digitalis also belongs. So why would a pump have a ligand, just like a receptor has a hormone ligand? And it's been debated, but then we found very unexpectedly that a low concentration of this ligand gave a signal that is similar to what hormone and receptors, as G protein coupled receptors do. Calcium going up and down in the cell like this, calcium oscillations. That was about a little bit more than 10 years ago, and that also then became relatively soon then accepted as that, okay, the pump has also a signaling function. But for us, and there are another groups now working on that, for us the important thing were the downstream effects. Because the downstream effects of these calciums, the frequency then was that it started a signaling cascade that led to protection from apoptosis. And I think this is the first time that a signal has been shown to protect from apoptosis in a physiological way. So that then led us to the question, back to clinics then, when would you need protection against apoptosis? And if you then go over the different then kidney diseases, you find that in both acute and in progressive renal disease, there are situations when you have apoptosis that you would like to prevent. But first of all, I like to return to the developing kidney, because the developing kidney then, the kidney is very, very sensitive to adverse conditions during pregnancy. And it's now, I think, generally accepted that if you have an adverse condition during the fetal life, you may end up with fewer nephrons, huge reduction of nephrons. And why is that? Well, because the kidney has to balance proliferation and apoptosis. So maybe then adverse conditions such as malnutrition caused a predominant increased apoptosis, and maybe we could protect from apoptosis and thereby rescue the kidney, even if in the case of malnutrition. And so we did a study which took us about 4 years to do, first on then cultured explant kidneys from rats, learning how to set up to record calcium signals in the different cell types in this whole organ, whole developing organ, and could find, to make a long story short, then that low concentrations of bovine that binds to about 1 out of 1,000 sodium potassium ATPases could actually protect from apoptosis in these cultured kidneys. And then we repeated the study in pregnant rats, with one group got very low protein diet, and this resulted in fewer nephrons, a huge reduction in the formation of nephrons. But if the pregnant rat has received a low concentration of bovine throughout pregnancy, the kidney was rescued. And so this was the first time that you could show that kidneys that have been exposed to adverse conditions during pregnancy can be rescued, and we hope there will be a good follow-up of this, because adverse conditions are common. Not, for instance, in preeclampsia, or then many women then give birth to children that are small for gestational age, and with that follows an increased risk for progressive kidney disease and also for hypertension. So this is something that we're very happy about and very proud of, this story. And now we're looking into various kinds of kidney diseases that are associated with apoptosis to see if activating this signal via bovine digitalis and the sodium potassium ATPase could then prevent permanent renal damage in, for instance, hemolytic uremic syndrome, which is associated with massive apoptosis, or in progressive kidney disease, where we have a disconnection between the glomerulus and the tubule, a disconnection that is to some extent dependent on apoptosis in the proximal tubule cells adjacent to the glomeruli. So that's where we are currently in our research.
So, curiosity and patience. Curiosity and passion.
Right, yes. Curiosity, you have to have curiosity. You have to be driven by curiosity. You want to know. You want to find out how it really is. And you have to have patience. And you have to enjoy what you're doing, and you have to work together with a number of talented people, young people that have both curiosity and a lot of patience. And I think that it is the teamwork also that is part of what makes it so great to work. And I think that the kidney gives us always then some unexpected results. endless then source of interesting findings if you work with the kidney. Did I enjoy best? I think it is. I think it is very. Then it's a great to be able to follow up patients, to be able to see when you can follow up children from if they have entered the emergency room for some disease. It has been then a kidney problem and kidney disease, and chronic turns out to be chronic. You don't really know how it's going, but then to follow up and see how you can make cure or at least get rid of the symptoms and to provide a good life for your children and for the family. It's you don't have one patient when you work in pediatrics. You have the whole family. I think that then to see then that those that were have had some serious malformation were born with malformations then, and were treated and worked together, close together with a surgeon to make the parents very confident in that we could improve the situation, and then to follow up and to so there will be some residues. These children, many of them then will have some permanent kidney damage, but which well, they have to make adaptation, but they could live with it. And to explain as the child grows up, I become very close then, but to the family, and to explain to the child about the disease, and to see that once the child, the girl, understands what was wrong, they cope with it even better. That's a good feeling when you can see that yeah. And no, well, it should be. You must first of all you must be very professional. It's easy to feel very emotional for the children, but at the same time to balance that to be very, very professional. You're not part of the family. You are the doctor because the patient and the family has to have confidence in your professionalism, that you are the best doctor they could go to. So it's a balance between being very close and very professional.
You said that you left the clinical work about 10 years ago, right? It's clear that you enjoy what you do, but do you miss it, the clinical part?
Well, you can't do that now, so I didn't do that much clinic the last 10 years either, so because you cannot do both on a really top level then. So now if you have a responsibility for a large research group, then you cannot, you will have relatively very little time to do clinics. You can have, say, clinics once or twice a week. So it was a step by step, then I went more and more into basic science. Do I miss it? No, I'd rather say I'll look back to it with great memory and great pleasure. And I have my 3 little grandchildren to be with kids, so it's a bit of a compensation. But I don't want to be their doctor, no. Well, at the time when I became professor of pediatrics, at that time, which was about 20 years ago, we were still also in charge of the clinic. That's where I also saw I had and felt that I should play a role for organizing pediatrics. I would like to merge the pediatrics in Stockholm so that those that have chronic diseases that would need really highly specialized doctors, that it was merged into one place. So then I started and led the project of building a pediatric hospital within the Karolinska Hospital in Solna. We call it Astrid Lindgren Children's Hospital. It's a Swedish very famous storyteller for children, Astrid Lindgren, and it has worked out well. It was a different kind of professional experience, but I truly enjoyed that also. We wanted, well, it was to bring together we have, I mean, to the emergency room come children that have a cold or something with the ears or so on. But then, and so sometimes we are overwhelmed with this. But this was to build a hospital for those children that have chronic disease and that really would need top specialist care, so that the parents will never ask the question, if I had lived some other place in the world, would I have gotten a better care then? That was, I think, the motivation for us to bring together all those that were specialists in neurology or in oncology or in diabetes and in nephrology. So this was the motivation for us. And to build a hospital which is based on the child, so to speak. It goes from the child that this should be some place where even if they have a chronic disease, they would feel safe and not be afraid to go to the hospital. They would feel that, okay, it's a second home. The setting was first also that pediatrics, I strongly believe that good clinic requires good research. So you have to have it together. And so one thing was that we wanted to build in a research lab, a large research lab, places with research were three groups, about 100 people working only in the research. The other thing was that we should again have it just centered around the child, and also give security. So the rooms should be one bed for a child and one bed for a parent. It should be single rooms, one child and one parent in the room then. And that was new, and it's sort of new also, and I think it has helped a lot. And then to bring specialities together, nephrology with pediatric surgery and so on. In general, yes. In general terms, yes. I think the great thing with the Nobel Prize, why does it have such prestige? And why does it have such a sustained prestige? I think one main reason is that in that testimony that you see there, it's given for the discovery. What made then us think in a different way, the maybe often unknown, unexpected discovery. And the work of the Nobel committees in physiology, medicine, in physics, and in chemistry, we all go for then try to trace back the original discovery. That's why it takes such a long time to get the Nobel Prize. Often then, especially in medicine, to identify what was the true discovery. And then the other thing is that it should have an impact also. And so even, it generally takes at least 10 years to be totally convinced that this is an extremely important discovery that has changed the way of thinking and that will have an impact for medicine and for how we treat our patients. So, and another thing is that it's totally confidential and something that we respect. When we work as professors, sit in the faculty, we talk a lot, we gossip a lot, but once we move into this room for the Nobel Prize, then we sort of elated, and where we then feel then that this enormous responsibility to maintain the confidentiality, to just go for the initial discovery, who did the discovery. So it's not lifetime achievement, it's discovery. And then it's of course been, this is why it's a privilege to be at the Karolinska Institute, which has then the responsibility to select the Nobel laureate in physiology or medicine. Because then we get in touch, firstly, when evaluating these different nominations, we learn a lot, and we have to go beyond our own field in reading. So that's one of the many good things that come out of that. The other thing is that it's not so difficult for some reason to invite top scientists from the world to come and lecture at the Karolinska Institute. And here, where you're now in the Academy of Science, that's where the Committee for Physics and for Chemistry meet to decide about the laureate in physics and in chemistry. Yes, and so it is. So it's a lifetime. It's a learning, and to understand and to get then so closely related to some of these great discoveries. It's an enormous privilege for us, and maybe one of the reasons why this small country is doing relatively well with regard to science. Oh, extremely important. I mean, when I first started my career, we did not have these roles, the ethical committees, neither for patient research or for animal research. And now it's so regulated. And of course you complain a little when you're going to write these applications, these long applications, and you have to go back and forth. But after all, it's so good. It's something that all of us appreciate so much, that it has been so well regulated now. The ethic, then there is always a could be conflicts in particularly with regard to patient ethics. Say there is something that is under trial, the clinical trial, first clinical trial, and you have a very sick patients where you would like to treat them with this drug that is under the trial, but you're not allowed to bring from the placebo group to the group. And there will be always these kind of conflicts, but nevertheless, I think that we should be very happy about this regulation. I wish that the rules should be it's the same standardized for all European countries. I think this is also very important for our exchange, because I believe also that we should have even more of an exchange in research and also in research training all over Europe, between the European countries. How do I see? I think it is one thing that I'm worried about is the fact that the drug companies are withdrawing from Europe more and more. They are withdrawing their research and developmental then departments, going to the United States or to Asia. And this, I think, is a great risk, because we need this interaction between academia and industry for developing new treatments. I think that we need to work together more. I'm not sure about that the frame programs are optimal. I think that these ERC grants, European Research Council grants, is something that is very stimulating, especially for young scientists, and it's a way to keep them, to maintain them in Europe and not move to leave Europe. We have to interact much more between different countries, and we have to interact more, I think, with industry. I think there are many factors that have contributed to this, if we then talk only now about life science. So firstly, I think that the flexibility of medical schools in Sweden has helped, that you have been allowed to take off a couple of years and do research. Because it's then to become a clinical scientist, a good clinical scientist, is very difficult if you go through medical school, your specialty training, and then start at the age of 35 to do research. So this flexible system that allows sort of a sandwiched training in both research and medicine has been very important. The Nobel Prize, of course, is very much of an inspiration for us. And also the high level of the thesis that in Sweden, I think, because we've worked on having a very high standard of the thesis, and it's also previously no longer so, which worries us a bit. It used to be a huge credit, so that in order to become the head of a, say, surgical department anywhere in the country, hospital, then it was definitely a great credit to have a PhD also. And so it has been, science has been important and has been an important part of our training. We see a reduction of time for clinicians to do science those days. We're worried about that, very much so. I guess it's not unique for Sweden, but it's something that worries us a lot. I think that this is something that we really have to fight for, to keep the clinical scientists, because without clinical scientists, then the medical research and particularly the impact for our patients will go downhill. Firstly, free time, early training in science, the chance to get a fellowship during your time in medical school or immediately after you graduate from medical school. And then to get, once you have your training and work as an MD and you do have had a scientific training, for 2 years or for longer, or PhD, then you should have the chance to continue. So at least at the university hospitals, there should be great possibilities to then have protected time, that is, to have continuous time for research. Maybe 6-month research, 6-month clinic. And that's the only way, because you can't start doing good science at 5:30 in the afternoon. Yeah, I think that we should not only ask for more money, redistribution of money. is a good way. And also, when we train research, we should all be very open-minded and also have some contact. Maybe sometimes we should have a co-supervisor from an RD department in the industry, and we should also so that we learn to communicate better. Yeah, that's what I think is important. No, well, I think that it's important to provide then young medical students and just graduate students with the possibility to do some clinical, to do some scientific work. I believe that it's very, very linked together, the quality of medicine with the quality of research. Also about mobility, that we should be very open to send our students, send our postdocs to not only send them out to the United States, we should exchange in Europe much more. And I don't understand why we don't do that. It's something that we should work for, I think. Besides medicine, literature. It's I always have to also be engaged in reading. I read a lot. Traveling and being with family. Yeah.
I think it's enough.
It's enough. Yes.
What kind of literature you love?
Oh, I think I read everything, both contemporary and older. Right now, I'm reading a lot of contemporary. I think right now, it's the book by David Grossman about this end of the road. I think it is in English, about a woman being so worried about her son being then drafted to the army that she just does not want to stay home to have the message about the death of her son, runs away from this, and then gives us bits and pieces of how her life with her sons and her family. It's a wonderful book. It also tells us about how complicated the conflicts is in Eastern world. So that's right now. That's well, poetry is to take now very kind interest in our Swedish Nobel laureate Thomas Tranströmer. You read his very simple lines and then you understand the depth behind them. It is something a little bit similar to the experience that you have when you do science and then all of a sudden you understand one more dimension and another, like opening different doors and seeing more and more. I think it's just to say that it's a very good choice to start in medical school, that's I wouldn't have more specialized because they will through the course of their studies then every year be confronted with different choices and different possibilities and be very open-minded for that. The other question was somebody that has graduated from medical school and wants to become a nephrologist. Well, as you've heard me say many times, I believe in that good medicine is dependent on good research. I would then suggest that they take at least a year of scientific training in order to be able to understand the disease processes better that they will see there. And then see how much would they like. But I think that if you want to only do something more than routine work, if you want to become a specialist, it's very important and extremely helpful for your whole career if you've also had some scientific training.